Hello, everybody. Okay, so today I have Diana from Endeavor Detroit, and she is so lovely and it has a lot to say. So I think that it would be great if you would kind of give a little bit of background on yourself and on Endeavor Detroit, just so people know
Sure.
who you are.
Yeah, so Deanna Callaghan, born and raised in Michigan. Spent my life really in traditional consulting in New York City for about 10 years and came back to Michigan 2014 really to get my MBA, but to really reconfigure my life and do something a little bit more purposeful. So 2014, 2016, I was in an MBA program really focused on entrepreneurship, finance, and strategy, and figuring out how do I create a career that really bridges the world of impact and the world of business to create social, economic, and environmental impact. And having been in New York for 10 years, I loved the city, but I really wanted to come back and serve Michigan. So that's kind of what brought me back. And then had the lovely opportunity about last summer when I was kind of between positions to kind of reflect on my background and figure out what I wanted to do for my next step. And met my predecessor who was leaving Endeavor at the time and who asked me to kind of talk to him a little bit about joining Endeavor. So in October of last year, I started as the managing director of Endeavor here in Detroit. And so for those of you who don't really know Endeavor started about 20 odd years ago in Latin America. And the idea was really two Harvard MBA students kind of reflected on how do you create economic change in typically under-resourced areas. And so they focused on Latin America, knowing that there were big cities like Buenos Aires and Santiago and Chile, and figuring out, what were the factors that really played a role in economic change in those regions. And through analysis and research, what they found is that there were very few people, founders of big companies, who really influenced the ecosystem pretty significantly. And if you really provide resources and support around those founders, they're the ones who are able to grow and scale significantly. They're the ones who also teach, support, and mentor other founders like themselves, who then create a robust ecosystem that bring and drive revenue growth, job growth, and investment in the region. So this is kind of a hypothesis that they tested in the 90s. It really took off and flourished. They brought a lot of great companies into the fold. And then it spread around Latin America. It was very successful. And about 6 years ago, the founders decided, what would happen if we brought it back to the States? So we know that there's areas across the States that aren't the Silicon Valleys, the New York Cities, and Chicago's, but that really have, the seeds of robust entrepreneurial ecosystems and could use a model like Endeavor's to really spur those economies.
Yeah.
So about 6 years ago, it was brought to Detroit. Right now, we're in about 59 different cities across the world, 37 different markets. And the whole idea is really supporting scale-up companies. So there's a lot of incredible organizations working in the startup ecosystem, but there's not as many working for scale-up companies, those that really are well-positioned to grow and scale tenfold. So that's who we work with. We have about 15 active companies right now in our portfolio. We're industry agnostic. Usually when companies come into the fold, they have significant revenue and or have attracted significant capital at that point in time. And we help them accelerate their growth and scale through pretty much 3 different types of products and services. So the first one is really access to markets. So let's say you have an incredible product, you're already doing very well kind of in the US or in the region. With our reach across 59 different cities, we have offices in those areas with people from those areas who understand the areas, the language, the culture, the municipalities. So we help as a conduit for these companies to access new markets. We also have an incredible network of mentors, which is really kind of the engine of Endeavor. So these mentors are industry experts, successful entrepreneurs themselves, venture capitalists, and experts kind of in their own skill sets. So we're very kind of selective on the mentors who join our network, and they're the ones who really help. If our founders have issues, they're the ones who really kind of help guide our founders, and not just our local mentors, but our global mentors. So that's kind of the first area is access to markets. The second area is around access to capital. So we do have a co-investment fund out of the Bay Area. So if you're one of our founders who come through the process, you can access investment through our fund. We also have incredible investors who actually are a part of our network, so they can use Endeavor as kind of a pipeline if they would like. And we have an amazing group of staff who help to identify who are investors that could align with companies in our portfolio who are raising rounds. And then third area is access to talent. So that's one area that we're constantly looking to improve, but it's really, if people need, if our founders and companies need project work, we have programs and relationships with EY, with Bain, with the U of M MAP program. We also have relationships with Venture for America. Executive. They're wonderful. We're huge fans.
I always feel like that people, I'll be like, wow, why is this person so smart? Oh, it's Venture for America fellow.
Yeah. Obviously, that came from Venture for America.
Yeah.
We love them, and we're really blessed to have them in our community. And we also have an executive education program. So as one of our founders, you have access to a program at Harvard, Stanford, and INSEAD. So that's a lot of, there's more what we do, but really those are kind of the three main buckets of services that we provide to our entrepreneurs.
Okay, a couple follow-up questions.
Yeah.
How long did you live in New York?
About 8.5 years.
Oh man, I feel like that's kind of just long enough to be one of those people that was like, when I was in New York, we ate way better sushi than here. We did this. Like any friends of mine that are like, I lived in New York for a really long time, or like every time you're like, oh yeah, we're going to go out to eat, back when we did that. We're going to go out to eat. They'll be like, well, there's no restaurant like there is a restaurant in New York. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, give me a break.
Yeah. I stopped using the word pop when I was out there and started saying coffee a little bit. And I was like, all right, I'm not a coffee. I'm not a New Yorker. I got to, get back to my Michigan roots. And that's when I left, when I knew that I was starting to drift away from my Michigan roots.
Yeah, that's so good. And then on the Endeavor side, I do totally think like I loved when Endeavor first started in Detroit, because a lot of the times in the research that I was doing at the time, we were finding that the experience level of a lot of the founders and a lot of the investors and here was slightly less than in a larger, like the Bay Area or whatever, where, we've got a lot of these like ingredients of like patents and research and like great universities and things like, so what you're saying of like all the seeds of entrepreneurship that are in this ecosystem, but then a lot of the times we don't have the experience necessary to like really like bind those things together in a really cohesive way. So I think that it just seems like super relevant to like I love the like scale up focus and like really taking those seeds to like put them together and then like just the mentorship side, you guys do have like kind of the greatest mentor network. So I'm like, I love myself some Endeavor.
Yeah, I mean, I really truly am. I wake up very blessed, that I'm in this position, because there's a global impact to the organization. There's a statewide country impact, but there's also really a local impact as well. And I think when you bridge all those together with our network of mentors and entrepreneurs and investors, it really shows you the power of Endeavor and the impact that we're doing across the world.
And you guys do such a great job too of like research, like between the impact report that you guys did even a couple years ago, like the one, and it was like so beautiful. Like I actually still have it in the trunk of my car that I haven't driven in like 3 months. But like I always like carry it around, and like I'm like, oh, this is like the cover is so thick. You can tell I do research reports for a living because I'm like, yes, look at the graphic design.
It's a great cover. That's a great cover.
Plus data is like real good in there too. But I do like how you guys really like integrate doing comprehensive research and data analysis around what you're doing. It's not just kind of like leading with some like promotional marketing theory and then like it's like you guys do the research first and then like implement the programs, which is like we all know I'm a fan of that.
And so we're actually we're going to be with the great support of William Davidson, we're going to be issuing some reports kind of in the following months that talk a little bit about Southeastern Michigan and some of the key areas where we have competitive advantage in entrepreneurship. So we'll go a little bit deeper. We did have a report last year, and this will be a kind of a follow-on on what are some things that we really need to focus on as a region to really help accelerate.
Important.
Yeah. So
that's so good. I'm excited for that. When do you think that will come out? Or like
we're looking, summertime, early fall, probably. So we'll see.
Cool. Yeah, we'll see. That's why I keep telling people it'll be then-ish. We'll see what happens.
Well, we're also in new times, right? So, a lot of the research that we're doing, we want to make sure that it's cognizant of how different industries are being affected right now. So we're trying to kind of, be thoughtful and reflective on that too.
Yeah, that is so true. Okay, I'll ask you my official questions now. This is all unofficial up until now, like 10 minutes. Okay, so, and I think you touched on this, but maybe if you have anything else to add, is how Endeavor sort of supports scale-up companies specifically across Michigan.
Yeah, so those are really the main areas that I mentioned. So it's really access to markets, access to capital, and access to talent, and the real idea. So I think in the last report that we had, we talked about somewhere around 10% of the scale-up companies that are in Southeastern Michigan attributed about 75% of job growth, job creation kind of in our region. So that's another factor why we really double down on scale-up companies. And, we're trying to be nimble. So Endeavor, those are kind of our bread and butter services that we provide, but we're really trying to listen actively to the market and what people want and what people need and where the gaps are so that we can play a better role in meeting those needs and making sure that they do have the resources necessary to accelerate their growth and scale.
Yeah. And then with the access to capital, where you guys have the fund, do the companies that get sort of into the program, is that what you would say, like into the program? Do they like automatically get a certain amount of investment, or is it just like they have the opportunity to potentially apply for that if they needed it?
It's a good question. So, one of the other parts that I don't know if everybody's aware of, but there is a selection process that you have to go through to be able to be a part of our network. So to be selected as an Endeavor entrepreneur. Yeah. So it's almost like our own due diligence where founder, and we are founder focused. So we don't serve the whole company. Obviously, we kind of really double down and focus on our founders themselves. Okay. So right. So we have to have a series of conversations kind of with our staff, with some of our mentors, our board members, and our entrepreneurs who are all part of the vetting process. And then we have something called a local selection panel where you have to be unanimously selected and approved by that local selection panel to make it to the final kind of round, which is an international selection panel. So you have internationally recognized founders, venture capitalists, leaders in different industries and their expertise and very recognizable names too, who then kind of vet you at that last step. And then once you actually go through the process and you become a part of our network. So that is our due diligence. So once you kind of go through that, then if you are raising a round, we will invest alongside an institutional investor. But you obviously don't have to have investment from us either. So I think about a third of our current portfolio has had investment from our Catalyst fund.
Okay. And then it's structured as sort of like a match to institutional money?
So I think it'll be about, I think, upwards to about 10% of the round. There's a cap on that as well, but it's not a one-to-one match per se. But you have to have an institutional investor leading the round for us to be able to do so. But there isn't a second level of due diligence, is the point. You've already gone through kind of this vetting process. So that is kind of our organization's due diligence.
Yeah, that's so smart. Oh, I love that. I'm like, wow, all the things. You guys really do like all the things that I like. Like I'm like, oh, like little private sector leads and like, yeah, okay. Anyway, well, I'll think about that later. Um, so next question. Endeavor works closely with many scale-up businesses. So what are the all my questions we're already covering. As I'm reading this, I'm like, well, we already said that.
No, let's try it.
Here's another side question then. Are you guys is Endeavor Detroit the only one in the Midwest, or is there other Endeavor locations across the Midwest?
So we have Endeavor Louisville. So they kind of serve also a little bit of the Southern Ohio area. I'll tell you the ones that we have. So we have Endeavor Puerto Rico, we have Endeavor Miami, Buffalo, Atlanta, Denver, and Louisville, as well as Northwest Arkansas. So our headquarters is in New York City, but we don't necessarily, that's not like one of our service areas per se. And then we have the fund out of the Bay Area, which is another kind of one of our operational hubs. So those are the offices though that we have in the States. Yeah.
I'm like always so interested about Atlanta. Like I always feel like they've got like so many really cool things going on there that I'm like, anytime I see like news about them, I was like, oh, man, they're doing like really cool stuff down there. So I'll have to look at. Do they have like a impact report that they do out of their ones? Because I'm like, oh, I should check that one out.
Yeah, so we all have a little bit of our different flavors of our reports. So what we've been doing a little bit differently this year is we're going to have a global impact report that talks a little bit about the global network. And then we're in the middle of kind of creating more of a Michigan-based focus of the impact that we've had. So the other offices do something similar.
Okay. All right. So my next question was, Endeavor works closely with so many scale-up businesses. What are the top 3 resources you are finding most useful for scale-up companies? You're like access to capital, access.
Yeah. Do you want to? You can go ahead and
yeah, I'm like access to talent, but yeah.
No, but you know what's funny is actually we were part of a great conversation that Paul Reiser at TechTown set up with an entity out of DC, the CAE.
Oh, right, yeah.
And for me, it was very reaffirming of what's continued to be needed in the communities. So, a couple of the main topics that came up again were access to capital and access to talent. So, and there were about 15 to 20 different entrepreneurs, I would say, who were on the call talking a little bit about their challenges, not only in the COVID world, but also just more generally in kind of southeastern Michigan and in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And they said, it's very difficult, to find and to retain top talent. Mm-hmm. And that, they're still losing top talent to the coasts or when they're looking to source out of even the universities, people still are leaving out of the universities to go to other areas across the US. There's also difficulty because we're still a growing ecosystem, to be able to have top leadership C-suite who's already been able to grow and scale companies. They know how to do it. When you're trying to do the same thing, so you're out of that, early stage startup time frame, but you're really well positioned to grow and scale, you need people who've been able to do it before. And we don't have as many companies who've, had successful exits and who've grown those companies to that size. So it's very difficult. You need to kind of look outside of the borders of Michigan, not solely, but I mean, you have to kind of extend your reach and figure out how do you incentivize these top leaders, across the U.S. to come into Michigan and to really be a part of the ecosystem. So talent is one of those. And it was verbalized over and over again from the participants who were on that call, and which we've seen in resource. And then similarly with capital. So, capital is just another one where, it's also tricky right now where everybody's wondering what's going to happen in southeastern Michigan, given everything happening, what's going to happen to our economy, what's going to happen to our funding streams. So, the investment landscape, that's another piece that we need to consider is, how do we double down? How do we provide more resources, take more risks, and really help the companies who are well positioned to take investment capital to be able to grow and scale. So those are, I think, 2 of the main needs, like you said, where scale up, businesses really still need support, and that we're actively trying to help in those 2 areas. I would say the third too is just expanding across our borders. So, reaching out to mentors, other people, like I mentioned, who've done it and who've done it really well in the past. Looking for other examples outside of even kind of our own small borders to feel a little bit more comfortable in the decisions and the path that they need to kind of go forward to grow and scale their companies. So those would be, I think, the 3 areas that are still needed.
One thing I find just with like doing research in different areas is that like every place has like such a unique history of, what types of industries are there, like who are the major players, what organizations play well with each other and what don't. And that like, do you find a lot of like that there's a challenge when you bring someone in that has like kind of like grown up in a different ecosystem and then is like coming into helping a company that's growing up in Southeast Michigan and is kind of like, here's what worked in the coasts or whatever, and then it just doesn't work in Southeast Michigan or something like that, or they're kind of like set things that you find are kind of like transcend different industries and different ecosystems?
I would say both. I think we are by nature, I think a little bit more risk averse in terms of Southeastern Michigan. I think we have a grit that a lot of ecosystems don't have. I think we're more resilient in many ways, but I also think we are a little bit more risk averse. So, coming in from the coasts where things move pretty quickly and there's, lots of different support systems, there's lots of different companies, there's lots of people who've done it before. I think understanding when to take those risks, it might be a little bit more natural, I think. Whereas here, there's still kind of a little bit of a risk aversion, a little bit of let's sit and wait, which I think when somebody comes in from the outside could be a little bit like, come on, let's speed this up, let's move it a little bit faster. But I also think, for people who do come in from, the coast and come to Michigan, there's also an excitement here that that you can't find there. I mean, it's almost a dime a dozen to see companies who are making it out of there. Here, it's like, it's not a new canvas. We've been doing this for a long time. I think we have incredible companies who've been successful here. We've got a great ecosystem, but I still think that it's new enough, or at least it's small enough where you can create more of an impact in our communities and with these companies. So I think there's also a true excitement for people who do come here and support the companies.
Yeah, and I feel like I had a call with Venture for America, the most recent class of fellows a couple of weeks ago, and like a lot of them were kind of echoing that sentiment of like, that they just keep hearing so much about Detroit and about Ann Arbor and about like Michigan generally and like all the growth that's been happening here, and now they were kind of like really wanted just to be part of that. And I know like they have a really high request rate of people who are wanting to come to Venture for America Detroit locations. So I'm always like, oh, cool. Yeah, like it does seem like people are really like excited about like building things in Detroit. So that's
there's still there's the cool factor. I mean, there's documentaries that you're finding popping up in Europe and other places where it's talking about, the resurgence of Detroit. Detroit has always been here. We already know that. There's been incredible entrepreneurs who've been here all along. I think they're just now starting to get a little bit more visibility, but that visibility in and of itself is, I think, attracting others who are interested in the culture and interested in some of the grit that's here. So that's
definitely. Kind of where it does seem like a lot of people like are like, oh, it used to be like 10 years ago, if you like you went on vacation and you're like, oh yeah, like I'm from Detroit, just because I'm from Farmington Hills, so I'm not claiming that I'm from Detroit, just for everybody that's from Detroit. Don't worry. But when you go somewhere else, like no one knows where Farmington Hills is, so you're just like, oh yeah, I'm from Detroit. Like 10 or 15 years ago, people might be like, oh, really? Yeah. How is it there? And like now they're like, oh, cool. Like I saw this or that or whatever, like they think that's like just like the coolest thing. So it doesn't like the secret is out.
Okay. For better or for worse, right?
Yeah, exactly. Last question. So you were a sponsor of the 2020 Detroit Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Report that we released in the beginning of April, which seems... Was it the beginning of April? Yeah, that's crazy because that seems like it was so long ago, but like that was weeks into shelter in place. So it'll be interesting time capsule. Anyway, so thank you very much for sponsoring that. And it's like so awesome. And we have, you guys are also sponsoring the Ann Arbor report that we have coming out that I think will be out in July-ish. And so in the research on Detroit, we'd found that there's a 58% increase in the number of tech startups based in Detroit in just the last 6 years. And so you can comment on that too. What advice would you give to companies growing their businesses in Detroit?
Very good question.
Everyone, just so you know, she already warned me she was going to disagree with part of the things. I was like, question. Okay, go ahead.
To softly disagree, not in the numbers, but if you actually, so you're talking about the last 6 years, but if you look at the last 5 years, it's been an 18% increase. And that translates, I think, into six different companies that have received venture capital over the last 5 years, which really isn't that much. Yeah. And there was a big jump, I think, from year 6 to year 5, but we really have kind of seen somewhat of more of a stagnant ecosystem. So I would almost kind of split the question kind of in two. It's more of, what does the ecosystem need to do to really make sure that entrepreneurs and companies are coming here and well positioned to flourish? And then also, like, when you are here in Detroit as a founder, what can you do and what should you do? And I think the first part, in terms of the ecosystem, I think we all have a lot of work to do still. So, from the policymaker perspective, we still need to increase incentives for people to be able to come here and to want to be here. We need to make it, obviously, transportation is a huge issue, especially if you're trying to get, workers to go to your jobs, and this is, as I mentioned, if these scale-up companies are the ones who are really kind of the engine of job growth in our region, we need to make sure that they can access workers. And there's lots of workers who still need jobs kind of in the region, but there's still a skill gap that I know a lot of people are working to close. But, access to transportation, infrastructure, access to education, incentives, tax incentives, all of those, little pieces of the puzzle are needed kind of from a policy perspective to make it a little bit more enticing for people to come. From a funder perspective, I think we talked a little bit about it before, is, making sure that people do have an eye on Detroit and they do take risks on the companies that are coming out of Detroit, all different types of companies. And that it's not just, a solo, here's Ann Arbor, here's Grand Rapids, here's Traverse City, and then here's Detroit, but that we're all kind of working together and we're leveraging kind of the network to support the ecosystem. So I think another piece of that is greater transparency around kind of the, how funders are looking at companies, what they're looking for, what types of companies that they're investing in, helping to provide a little bit more of that knowledge sharing of, what companies need to do to prepare for some of that capital is going to be important too. And I think the funders can play a strong role. And then for a lot of us, the support organizations that exist, it's, how do we become better collaborators? I think there's a lot of organizations who are doing incredible work. And I feel like the conversations that I've been having with a lot of these leaders, we're all on the same page that we need to be better collaborators. But there's still a lot of room to do that. And we need to make sure that we're focused on that. And I think we really need to prove kind of our individual impact as organizations, as well as our collective impact as organizations, and make sure that we're tracking that and we're telling our story better. So that way we know that we're doing what we set out to do.
I think that too is like at the top of mind for a lot of people, just even like as the pandemic kind of subsides, and then going into like, I know a lot of people have seen at different foundations, like the endowment has been hit pretty hard. And like, I know a lot of conversations we've had with different foundations, they want to like really make sure that the money that they are investing into a lot of these different programs and companies is like really making the impact that they're hoping to have. So that is like, and
it's helpful for us too to know, what are we doing that's really not creating impact, so that we're not putting our time and resources toward there. And let's figure out really what the needs are, so that we can make sure that we're doubling down really on the areas that need the most support kind of in our ecosystem. So I think, to answer your question the long way, that's kind of what we need from an ecosystem perspective. I think we also need more support from our expats, because we have so many expats who are dedicated and who love Southeastern Michigan. The other side is on the entrepreneurship side, which kind of you asked. And I think as an entrepreneur who's here in Detroit and southeastern Michigan, I mean, one of the most amazing parts about Michigan is that we have some of the kindest people. So anybody who I've called since I've started in October has been incredibly supportive, incredibly thoughtful, takes time to be able to help. So I would say, reach out to your greater network, make sure that you know all the players who can support you, and don't be afraid to ask about that. But on the flip side, be a part of the puzzle, be a part of, enhancing the ecosystem here for entrepreneurs and give back. So
yeah,
we know that it only takes one or two different founders to really create significant change if they mentor other founders in ecosystems. And that's really what we've seen kind of in the research that we've had in the past. So if our founders here locally, both leverage people who've done it previously and also take time to support other founders who are trying to do it so they're not starting from scratch, I think it'll make our whole ecosystem a lot stronger.
Yeah, definitely. And that is like a lot of what we see too, is just like the experience level, and like passing that experience on and that knowledge on to other people. But what you said is totally right. I think like a lot of people are like so willing to help. And so it's like great that you guys kind of have a model for really making sure that like that platform of like knowledge sharing and like connecting people and these various elements together is there for people, because I think like that is a big part of what we've been building for the last 5-10 years in the Midwest, is just like you might have these great research institutions or these great for like spinning out research and talent and all that, and then you might have these great founders and these great investors, but like really helping like connect all the capital and the research and the talent all together is like really critical. So I think you guys are doing so great. Big endeavor, girl.
Thank you. Well, we are to a entry point in the work that you're doing. So feels like this feels great.
Yeah. Well, cool. I will let you go, but thank you so much for just me seeing your face even is so awesome. I feel like all of these little conversations like that we're having, we're doing this on Mondays and Wednesdays. I just like feel like I'm like the outside world is there. It's still there and everyone's doing so awesome.
Yeah.
In a way. But yeah, so cool. Thank you so much. And then I will talk to you soon, hopefully.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I look forward to it.
Yay. Okay.
All right. Bye.